Welcome back to Another World Audiobooks. Thank you guys for tuning in. It is so great to have you here. I have to make a correction. I will fix it. It's very difficult to fix like in the podcast, but when I actually publish the audiobook, it will be fixed. Apparently, the pronunciation guide that I found for the word antipode is incorrect. It is not pronounced antipode. It's antipode, and it refers to a part of the Earth diametrically opposed, usually used in the plural, so like Australia and New Zealand as contrasted with the Western Hemisphere. And it's not antipode, apparently, it's antipode. Antipodes is plural. So, I looked up a pronunciation guide on that one, I swear, and somehow it led me wrong. So, apologies for that. I'm sure somebody, some sharp-eared listener caught that. Anyhow, thanks guys for tuning in today and sharing the podcast with people that you know who might enjoy a free audiobook, which, let's be honest, who wouldn't enjoy a free audiobook? Let's jump into it without further ado. I'll give you the next couple chapters of Around the World in 80 Days. Chapter 20, in which Fix comes face to face with Phileas Fogg. While these events were passing at the opium house, Mr. Fogg, unconscious of the danger he was in of losing the steamer, was quietly escorting Aouda about the streets of the English quarter, making the necessary purchases for the long voyage before them. It was all very well for an Englishman like Mr. Fogg to make the tour of the world with a carpet-bag. A lady could not be expected to travel comfortably under such conditions. He acquitted his task with characteristic serenity, and invariably replied to the remonstrances of his fair companion, who was confused by his patience and generosity. "It is in the interest of my journey, a part of my programme." The purchases made, they returned to the hotel, where they dined at a sumptuously served table d'hôte, after which Aouda, shaking hands with her protector after the English fashion, retired to her room for rest. Mr. Fogg absorbed himself throughout the evening in the perusal of the Times and Illustrated London News. Had he been capable of being astonished at anything, it would have been not to see his servant return at bedtime. But, knowing that the steamer was not to leave for Yokohama until the next morning, he did not disturb himself about the matter. When Passepartout did not appear the next morning to answer his master's bell, Mr. Fogg, not betraying the least vexation, contented himself with taking his carpet-bag, calling Aouda, and sending for a palanquin. It was then 8 o'clock. At 9:30, it being then high tide, the Carnatic would leave the harbour. Mr. Fogg and Aouda got into the palanquin, their luggage being brought after on a wheelbarrow, and half an hour later stepped upon the quay whence they were to embark. Mr. Fogg then learned that the Carnatic had sailed the evening before. He had expected to find not only the steamer, but his domestic, and was forced to give up both. But no sign of disappointment appeared on his face, and he merely remarked to Aouda, "It is an accident, madam, nothing more." At this moment, a man who had been observing him attentively approached. It was Fix, who, bowing, addressed Mr. Fogg. "Were you not, like me, sir, a passenger by the Rangoon which arrived yesterday?" "I was, sir," replied Mr. Fogg coldly. "But I have not the honour—" "Pardon me, I thought I should find your servant here."
"Do you know where he is, sir?"
asked Aouda anxiously.
"What?"
responded Fix, feigning surprise.
"Is he not with you?"
"No,"
said Aouda.
"He has not made his appearance since yesterday. Could he have gone on board the Carnatic without us?"
"Without you, madam?"
answered the detective.
"Excuse me, did you intend to sail in the Carnatic?"
"Yes, sir."
"So did I, madam, and I am excessively disappointed. The Carnatic, its repairs being completed, left Hong Kong 12 hours before the stated time, without any notice being given, and we must now wait a week for another steamer."
As he said "a week," Fix felt his heart leap for joy. Fogg detained at Hong Kong for a week. There would be time for the warrant to arrive, and fortune at last favoured the representative of the law. His horror may be imagined when he heard Mr. Fogg say, in his placid voice, "But there are other vessels besides the Carnatic, it seems to me, in the harbour of Hong Kong." And, offering his arm to Aouda, he directed his steps toward the docks in search of some craft about to start. Fix, stupefied, followed. It seemed as if he were attached to Mr. Fogg by an invisible thread. Chance, however, appeared really to have abandoned the man it had hitherto served so well. For 3 hours Phileas Fogg wandered about the docks, with the determination, if necessary, to charter a vessel to carry him to Yokohama, but he could only find vessels which were loading or unloading, and which could not therefore set sail. Fix began to hope again. But Mr. Fogg, far from being discouraged, was continuing his search, resolved not to stop if he had to resort to Macao, when he was accosted by a sailor on one of the wharves.
"Is your honour looking for a boat?"
"Have you a boat ready to sail?"
"Yes, your honour, a pilot boat, number 43, the best in the harbour."
"Does she go fast?"
"Between 8 and 9 knots the hour. Will you look at her?"
"Yes."
"Your honour will be satisfied with her. Is it for a sea excursion?"
"No, for a voyage."
"A voyage?"
"Yes. Will you agree to take me to Yokohama?" The sailor leaned on the railing, opened his eyes wide, and said,
"Is your honour joking?"
"No, I have missed the Carnatic, and I must get to Yokohama by the 14th at the latest, to take the boat for San Francisco."
"I am sorry,"
said the sailor,
"but it is impossible."
"I offer you £100 per day, and an additional reward of £200 if I reach Yokohama in time."
"Are you in earnest?"
"Very much so." The pilot walked away a little distance, and gazed out to sea, evidently struggling between the anxiety to gain a large sum, and the fear of venturing so far. Fix was in mortal suspense. Mr. Fogg turned to Aouda, and asked her, "You would not be afraid, would you, madam?"
"Not with you, Mr. Fogg,"
was her answer. The pilot now returned, shuffling his hat with his hands. "Well, pilot?" said Mr. Fogg.
"Well, your honour,"
replied he,
"I could not risk myself, my men, or my little boat of scarcely 20 tons on so long a voyage at this time of year. Besides, we could not reach Yokohama in time, for it is 1,660 miles from Hong Kong."
"Only 1,600, said Mr. Fogg.
"It's the same thing."
Fix breathed more freely.
"But,"
added the pilot,
"it might be arranged another way."
Fix ceased to breathe at all. "How?" asked Mr. Fogg.
"By going to Nagasaki at the extreme south of Japan, or even to Shanghai, which is only 800 miles from here. And going to Shanghai, we will not be forced to sail wide of the Chinese coast, which would be a great advantage, as the currents run northward, and would aid us."
"Pilot," said Mr. Fogg, "I must take the American steamer at Yokohama, and not at Shanghai or Nagasaki."
"Why not?"
returned the pilot.
"The San Francisco steamer does not start from Yokohama. It puts in at Yokohama and Nagasaki, but it starts from Shanghai."
"You are sure of that?"
"Perfectly."
"And when does the boat leave Shanghai?"
"On the 11th, at 7 in the evening. We have therefore 4 days before us, that is 96 hours, and in that time, if we had good luck and a southwest wind, and the sea was calm, we could make those 800 miles to Shanghai."
"And you could go—"
"In an hour, as soon as provisions could be got on board and the sails put up."
"It is a bargain. Are you the master of the boat?"
"Yes, John Bunsby, master of the Tankadere."
"Would you like some earnest money?"
"If it would not put your honour out."
"Here are £200 on account, sir," added Phileas Fogg, turning to Fix. "If you would like to take advantage—"
"Thanks, sir. I was about to ask the favour."
"Very well. In half an hour we shall go on board."
"But poor Passepartout,"
urged Aouda, who was much disturbed by the servant's disappearance. "I shall do all I can to find him," replied Phileas Fogg. While Fix, in a feverish, nervous state, repaired to the pilot boat, the others directed their course to the police station at Hong Kong. Phileas Fogg there gave Passepartout's description, and left a sum of money to be spent in the search for him. The same formalities having been gone through at the French consulate, and the palanquin having stopped at the hotel for the luggage, which had been sent back there, they returned to the wharf. It was now 3 o'clock. The pilot boat, number 43, and its crew on board, and its provisions stored away, was ready for departure. The Tankadere was a neat little craft of 20 tons, as gracefully built as if she were a racing yacht. Her shining copper sheathing, her galvanized ironwork, her deck, white as ivory, betrayed the pride taken by John Bunsby in making her presentable. Her two masts leaned a trifle backward. She carried brigantine, foresail, storm jib, and standing jib, and was well rigged for running before the wind, and she seemed capable of brisk speed, which, indeed, she had already proved by gaining several prizes in pilot-boat races. The crew of the Tankadere was composed of John Bunsby, the master, and 4 hardy mariners, who were familiar with the Chinese seas. John Bunsby himself, a man of 45 or thereabouts, vigorous, sunburnt, with a sprightly expression of the eye, and energetic and self-reliant countenance, would have inspired confidence in the most timid. Phileas, Fogg, and Aouda went on board, where they found Fix already installed. Below deck was a square cabin, of which the walls bulged out in the form of cots, above a circular divan. In the centre was a table provided with a swinging lamp. The accommodation was confined, but neat. "I am sorry to have nothing better to offer you," said Mr. Fogg to Fix, who bowed without responding. The detective had a feeling akin to humiliation in profiting by the kindness of Mr. Fogg.
"It's certain," thought he, "though rascal as he is a polite one."
The sails and the English flag were hoisted at 10 minutes past 3. Mr. Fogg and Aouda, who were seated on deck, cast a last glance at the quay, in the hope of espying Passepartout. Fix was not without his fears lest chance should direct the steps of the unfortunate servant, whom he had so badly treated, in this direction, in which case an explanation the reverse of satisfactory to the detective must have ensued. But the Frenchman did not appear, and without doubt was still lying under the stupefying influence of the opium. John Bunsby, master, at length gave the order to start, and the Tankadere, taking the wind under her brigantine, foresail, and standing jib, bounded briskly forward over the waves. Chapter 21, in which the master of the Tankadere runs great risk of losing a reward of £200. This voyage of 800 miles was a perilous venture on a craft of 20 tons, and at that season of the year. The Chinese seas are usually boisterous, subject to terrible gales of wind, and especially during the equinoxes, and it was now early November. It would clearly have been to the master's advantage to carry his passengers to Yokohama, since he was paid a certain sum per day, but he would have been rash to attempt such a voyage, and it was imprudent even to attempt to reach Shanghai. But John Bunsby believed in the Tankadere, which rode on the waves like a seagull, and perhaps he was not wrong. Late in the day they passed through the capricious channels of Hong Kong, and the Tankadere, impelled by favourable winds, conducted herself admirably. "I do not need, pilot," said Phileas Fogg, when they got into the open sea, "to advise you to use all possible speed."
"Trust me, your honour, we are carrying all the sail the wind will let us. The poles would add nothing, and are only used when we are going into port."
"It's your trade, not mine, pilot, and I confide in you." Phileas Fogg, with body erect and legs wide apart, standing like a sailor, gazed without staggering at the swelling waters. The young woman, who was seated aft, was profoundly affected as she looked out upon the ocean, darkening now with the twilight, on which she had ventured in so frail a vessel. Above her head rustled the white sails, which seemed like great white wings. The boat, carried forward by the wind, seemed to be flying in the air. Night came. The moon was entering her first quarter, and her insufficient light would soon die out in the mist on the horizon. Clouds were rising from the east, and already overcast a part of the heavens. The pilot had hung out his lights, which was very necessary in these seas crowded with vessels bound landward, for collisions are not uncommon occurrences, and at the speed she was going, the least shock would shatter the gallant little craft. Fix, seated in the bow, gave himself up to meditation. He kept apart of his fellow-travellers, knowing Mr. Fogg's taciturn tastes. Besides, he did not quite like to talk to the man whose favours he had accepted. He was thinking, too, of the future. It seemed certain that Fogg would not stop at Yokohama, but would at once take the boat for San Francisco, and the vast extent of America would ensure him impunity and safety. Fogg's plan appeared to him the simplest in the world. Instead of sailing directly from England to the United States, like a common villain, he had traversed 3/4 of the globe, so as to gain the American continent more surely, and there, after throwing the police off his track, he would quietly enjoy himself with the fortune stolen from the bank. But once in the United States, what should he, Fix, do? Should he abandon this man? No, 100 times no. Until he had secured his extradition, he would not lose sight of him for an hour. It was his duty, and he would fulfill it to the end. At all events, there was one thing to be thankful for. Passepartout was not with his master, and it was above all important, after the confidences Fix had imparted to him, that the servant should never have speech with his master. Phileas Fogg was also thinking of Passepartout, who had so strangely disappeared. Looking at the matter from every point of view, it did not seem to him impossible that, by some mistake, the man might have embarked on the Carnatic at the last moment. And this was also Aouda's opinion, who regretted very much the loss of the worthy fellow to whom she owed so much. They might then find him at Yokohama, for, if the Carnatic was carrying him thither, it would be easy to ascertain if he had been on board. A brisk breeze arose about 10 o'clock, but though it might have been prudent to take in a reef, the pilot, after carefully examining the heavens, let the craft remain rigged as before. The Tankadere bore sail admirably, as she drew a great deal of water, and everything was prepared for high speed in case of a gale. Mr. Fogg and Aouda descended into the cabin at midnight, having been already preceded by Fix, who had lain down on one of the cots. The pilot and crew remained on deck all night. At sunrise the next day, which was 8th November, the boat had made more than 100 miles. The log indicated a mean speed of between 8 and 9 miles. The Tankadere still carried all sail, and was accomplishing her greatest capacity of speed. If the wind held as it was, the chances would be in her favor. During the day she kept along the coast, where the currents were favorable. The coast, irregular in profile, and visible sometimes across the clearings, was at most 5 miles distant. The sea was less boisterous, since the wind came off land, a fortunate circumstance for the boat, which would suffer, owing to its small tonnage, by a heavy surge on the sea. The breeze subsided a little towards noon, and set in from the southwest. The pilot put up his poles, but took them down again within 2 hours, as the wind freshened up anew. Mr. Fogg and Aouda, happily unaffected by the roughness of the sea, ate with a good appetite, Fix being invited to share their repast, which he accepted with secret chagrin. To travel at this man's expense, and live upon his provisions, was not palatable to him. Still, he was obliged to eat, and so he ate. When the meal was over, he took Mr. Fogg apart and said, "Sir?" This "sir" scorched his lips, and he had to control himself to avoid collaring this gentleman. "Sir, you have been very kind to give me a passage on this boat, but though my means will not admit of my expending them as freely as you, I must ask to pay my share." "Let us not speak of that, sir," replied Mr. Fogg.
"But if I insist—"
"No, sir," repeated Mr. Fogg, in a tone which did not admit a reply. "This enters into my general expenses." Fix, as he bowed, had a stifled feeling, and, going forward, where he ensconced himself, did not open his mouth for the rest of the day. Meanwhile they were progressing famously, and John Bunsby was in high hope. He several times assured Mr. Fogg that they would reach Shanghai in time, to which that gentleman responded that he counted upon it. The crew set to work in good earnest, inspired by the reward to be gained. There was not a sheet which was not tightened, not a sail which was not vigorously hoisted. Not a lurch could be charged to the man at the helm. They worked as desperately as if they were contesting in a royal yacht regatta. By evening, the log showed that 220 miles had been accomplished from Hong Kong, and Mr. Fogg might hope that he would be able to reach Yokohama without recording any delay in his journal. In which case, the many misadventures which had overtaken him since he left London would not seriously affect his journey. The Tankadere entered the Straits of which separate the island of Formosa from the Chinese coast, in the small hours of the night, and crossed the Tropic of Cancer. The sea was very rough in the straits, full of eddies formed by the counter-currents, and the chopping waves broke her course, whilst it became very difficult to stand on deck. At daybreak, the wind began to blow hard again, and the heavens seemed to predict a gale. The barometer announced a speedy change, the mercury rising and falling capriciously. The sea also, in the southeast, raised long surges which indicated a tempest. The sun had set the evening before in a red mist, in the midst of the phosphorescent scintillations of the ocean. John Bunsby long examined the threatening aspect of the heavens, muttering indistinctly between his teeth. At last he said in a low voice to Mr. Fogg,
"Shall I speak out to your honour?"
"Of course."
"Well, we are going to have a squall."
"Is the wind north or south?" asked Mr. Fogg quietly.
"South. Look, a typhoon is coming up."
"Glad it's a typhoon from the south, for it will carry us forward."
"Well, if you take it that way," said John Bunsby, "I've nothing more to say."
John Bunsby's suspicions were confirmed. At a less advanced season of the year, the typhoon, according to a famous meteorologist, would have passed away like a luminous cascade of electric flame. But in the winter equinox, it was to be feared that it would burst upon them with great violence. The pilot took his precautions in advance. He reefed all sail, the pole masts were dispensed with, all hands went forward to the bows. A single triangular sail of strong canvas was hoisted as a storm jib, so as to hold the wind from behind. Then they waited. John Bunsby had requested his passengers to go below, but this imprisonment in so narrow a space, with little air, and the boat bouncing in the gale, was far from pleasant. Neither Mr. Fogg, Fix, nor Aouda consented to leave the deck. The storm of wind and rain descended upon them towards 8 o'clock. With but its bit of sail, the Tankadere was lifted like a feather by a wind, an idea of whose violence can scarcely be given. To compare her speed to 4 times that of a locomotive going on full steam would be below the truth. The boat scudded thus northward during the whole day, borne on by monstrous waves, preserving always, fortunately, a speed equal to theirs. 20 times she seemed almost to be submerged by these mountains of water which rose behind her. But the adroit management of the pilot saved her. The passengers were often bathed in spray, but they submitted to it philosophically. Fix cursed it, no doubt, but Aouda, with her eyes fastened upon her protector, whose coolness amazed her, showed herself worthy of him, and bravely weathered the storm. As for Phileas Fogg, it seemed just as if the typhoon were a part of his programme. Up to this time, the Tankadere had always held her course to the north, but towards evening the wind, veering 3/4, bore down from the northwest. The boat, now lying in the trough of the waves, shook and rolled terribly. The sea struck her with fearful violence. At night, the tempest increased in violence. John Bunsby saw the approach of darkness and the rising of the storm with dark misgivings. He thought a while, and then asked his crew if it was not time to slacken speed. After a consultation, he approached Mr. Fogg and said,
"I think, Your Honour, that we should do well to make for one of the ports on the coast."
"I think so too."
"Ah,"
said the pilot.
"But which one?"
"I know of but one," returned Mr. Fogg tranquilly.
"And that is—"
"Shanghai." The pilot, at first, did not seem to comprehend. He could scarcely realize so much determination and tenacity. Then he cried,
"Well, yes, Your Honour is right. To Shanghai."
So the Tankadere kept steadily on her northward track. The night was really terrible. It would be a miracle if the craft did not founder. Twice it could have been all over with her if the crew had not been constantly on the watch. Aouda was exhausted, but did not utter a complaint. More than once Mr. Fogg rushed to protect her from the violence of the waves. Day reappeared. The tempest still raged with undiminished fury, but the wind now returned to the southeast. It was a favourable change, and the Tankadere again bounded forward on this mountainous sea, though the waves crossed each other and imparted shocks and counter-shocks which would have crushed a craft less solidly built. From time to time the coast was visible through the broken mist, but no vessel was in sight. The Tankadere was alone upon the sea. There were some signs of a calm at noon, and these became more distinct as the sun descended toward the horizon. The tempest had been as brief as terrific. The passengers, thoroughly exhausted, could now eat a little and take some repose. The night was comparatively quiet. Some of the sails were again hoisted, and the speed of the boat was very good. The next morning at dawn they espied the coast, and John Bunsby was able to assert that they were not 100 miles from Shanghai. 100 miles, and only one day to traverse them. That very evening Mr. Fogg was due at Shanghai, if he did not wish to miss the steamer to Yokohama. Had there been no storm, during which several hours were lost, they would be at this moment within 30 miles of their destination. The wind grew decidedly calmer, and happily the sea fell with it. All sails were now hoisted, and at noon the Tankadere was within 45 miles of Shanghai. There remained yet 6 hours in which to accomplish that distance. All on board feared that it could not be done, and everyone, Phileas Fogg no doubt excepted, felt his heart beat with impatience. The boat must keep up an average of 9 miles an hour, and the wind was becoming calmer every moment. It was a capricious breeze coming from the coast, and after it passed the sea became smooth. Still, the Tankadere was so light, and her fine sails caught the fickle zephyrs so well, that, with the aid of the currents, John Bunsby found himself at 6 o'clock not more than 10 miles from the mouth of Shanghai River. Shanghai itself is situated at least 12 miles up the stream. At 7 they were still 3 miles from Shanghai. The pilot swore an angry oath. The reward of £200 was evidently on the point of escaping him. He looked at Mr. Fogg. Mr. Fogg was perfectly tranquil, and yet his whole fortune was at this moment at stake. At this moment also, a long black funnel, crowded with wreaths of smoke, appeared on the edge of the waters. It was the American steamer, leaving for Yokohama at the appointed time. "Confound her!" cried John Bunsby, pushing back the rudder with a desperate jerk. "Signal her," said Phileas Fogg quietly. A small brass cannon stood on the forward deck of the Tankadere for making signals in the fogs. It was loaded to the muzzle, but just as the pilot was about to apply a red-hot coal to the touch-hole, Mr. Fogg said, "Hoist your flag." The flag was run up at half-mast, and this being the signal of distress, it was hoped that the American steamer, perceiving it, would change her course a little so as to succor the pilot-boat. "Fire," said Mr. Fogg, and the booming of the little cannon resounded in the air. All right, we made it out of the storm. Let's see what happens next. Tune in next week. We're going to be coming at you. And remember, if you are a patron, you've probably already heard whatever's coming next next week, because patrons get it early. So it pays to be a patron. Go to anotherworldaudiobooks.com. You can sign up for those patron perks and support the show. Help me help you by continuing to bring free audiobooks on this podcast feed. You get them early. You'll get all kinds of bonuses and special perks for being a patron. So check that out. Again, anotherworldaudiobooks.com. Could not do this podcast without our amazing patrons. So thank you to each and every one of you who signed up to be a patron. But again, if you can't sign up to be a patron, I totally understand. No worries there. This is a free podcast for a reason. But all I ask is that you share the podcast, spread the word, and share the podcast with other people so we can continue to grow and continue to bring you this stuff. All right, a few vocabulary words. I have heard the word zephyr forever, but I never actually really knew what it was. I thought it referred to an animal of some sort. I think it's Give Me a Home on the Range, that song, the Zephyr's So Free, or Zephyr's So whatever. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about, probably. But yeah, zephyr means the west wind, or a gentle breeze. Apparently it's named for the Greek god of the wind from the west. Those Greeks had a god for everybody. It's kind of crazy. Zephyrus, yeah. So that's a west wind. And a very interesting word that I'd heard it a million times, but never knew what it was. So apparently a zephyr is not some kind of female zebra, which that would have been my best guess. Anyway, let's see. Next one was scintillation, which I've heard of something like a scintillating scent or something like that. It's kind of like, oh, it like gets your senses going, but apparently it's actually has to do with a spark or a flash or a rapid variation in the light of a celestial body caused by turbulence in the Earth's atmosphere, a twinkling. So that's kind of a cool one. Scintillation. There you go. And then I tried Tankadere, the name of the boat. I hope I'm pronouncing that one right. Oh boy, I could not find a pronunciation for it. Apparently it's not actually like a real word. Sounds like it's more of a corruption of the Portuguese word Tankadere. Tankadere. I can't. Yeah. Anyway, it's related to the Chinese Tonka people, or the boat people of southern China. So basically, it was used to refer to a specific type of vessel. It was kind of a corruption of that Portuguese word that referred to the Chinese boat people. So, interesting one there. And then this one, I did my best with the French pronunciation. Table d'hôte is a communal table for all the guests of a hotel or restaurant. So a full course meal offering a limited number of choices and served as a fixed price in a restaurant or hotel. Table d'hôte. I like that. I don't think I've ever eaten at a restaurant that had a table d'hôte, but that sounds like it would be fun. Have you ever eaten at a restaurant with a table d'hôte? I'd love to hear from you. Again, any thoughts or questions or things that I mispronounced, get in touch, anotherworldaudiobooks@gmail.com, or post them on social media, or maybe don't post my mispronunciations on social media. That's you can just email me privately on those. But if you love the podcast and have some good feedback, send it on social media so that everybody can see it. Spread the word, and thank you guys so much for listening, sharing the podcast, and for our amazing patrons to make this possible. Thanks, guys, and we'll catch you next week.